Hi everyone! Glad to see you on my channel. My name is Nadia. This is a channel about crochet and knitting too. In this video, I will teach you how to crochet this very simple hat. It is warm and bulky, but it has one main flaw. People who wear or see my hats note that they all have one big, significant flaw. I don't know how to deal with it. What should I do? What should they do? They all say that it's impossible to find the face, the wrong side, the front, or the back of my hat. How do you even put it on? They always say, Nadia, at least make a tag. You crochet these hats, but it's unclear where the front is, where the back is, where the seam is, or where the tail is. How do I wear it? And here's what I say. I suffer from this myself, but I always say, just wear it however you want. It is crocheted in a turned row technique. And if you are familiar with this crocheting technique, or this principle of crocheting in general, it should have a seam that joins it. Of course, it has one, but as always, I sat for a bit, did some magic, took a hook and a needle, some yarn and contrast thread, and again, I came up with an ideal jewelry seam, which this time, in this project, is suitable for single crochets. I am showing it for the first time. It is my own development. Maybe someone once crocheted exactly like this. I haven't seen it. I know nothing about that. I came up with everything myself. All the life hacks, all the methods. And I am sharing all of this with you. The hat is very simple. It's worked in single crochet. There are no other stitches here. I think it will suit a beginner too. For a diligent beginner who is ready to master my jewelry seam, because it will still be a bit unusual. So, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are ready to get into this project. Let's begin. For the hat, I need this yarn. This is Pehorkas Mesovia. Look, there was one skein. It has 200 meters and 200 grams. It's quite thick. It is like roving, not very tightly twisted. Let me find the composition. 30% wool and 70% acrylic. You might ask if one 100-gram skein is enough. No, I used more than half. This is a bulky hat, after all. It requires a bit more than 100 grams. Yes, this is not even the rest of the skein. Of course, to show all the life hacks, I will need a contrast thread. You can't do without it. Take a cord. Do not take a woolen contrast thread. Especially if you take white yarn and, for example, some green, blue, or red contrast woolen thread. Do not take it. It will leave its fuzz on the white color. It will be visible. Take specifically a cord or some cord style or cotton yarn as the contrast thread. I have Caramel Baby. It's left over from a bag. Why a cord? Because a cord won't leave lint. It won't get felted into the work. But this yarn here is almost roving. The cord will be very easy to remove, and it won't leave marks behind. Naturally, you will need scissors. Also, of course, a large eye needle and a hook. I am taking a 7mm hook. This is the hook we will use to crochet. I might also use a 4 or 5mm hook, but that is a secondary tool, a bit thinner if I need it somewhere. That's all for materials and tools. Now about the crocheting itself. I always suggest crocheting a swatch first. To determine the dimensions of this hat, specifically the length, first crochet with the tool and yarn you intend to use for the hat. You can crochet the hat from any yarn, not necessarily like my swatch. Look, the height of my hat is about 30, 31, or 32 centimeters. You can see the photo, see the brim and how it sits. If everything suits you, make the height the same. You need to crochet a swatch, calculate your gauge in 10 centimeters. A very simple formula will be on the screen. Measure your swatch, determine the gauge, and get your starting chain count. For me, it turned out that I need to chain 35 for the total height. Now about the row gauge, height of the rows. You don't have to measure the row gauge. We will work in these micro wedges, and I will simply try the hat on as I go. The width of the fabric will depend on your head circumference. I just determine it by fitting. I don't take measurements, but for you, I will say what I got. My half circumference turned out to be about 25 centimeters. Look, this is just because it is thick yarn and bulky yarn. If I had some thin yarn, say 200 meters and 100 grams, the circumference would be smaller. Just because of this thickness, I have to make a fairly wide fabric, 25 centimeters. I got all of this by fitting. Now for the crocheting itself. Take the contrast thread. Again, a bit of theory. The contrast thread should be similar in thickness to the main yarn you will use. Don't take a thin contrast thread. You can use a thin t-shirt yarn. If you have any leftovers, take those. Take some cord. Don't take a very thin cotton thread, because then your first row's gauge won't match the rest of the rows. So I calculated that I need 35 stitches. I chain 35 with the contrast thread using the main hook. 1, 2, 3. The stitches are chained. There are 35 stitches here. This is the height of the hat. Next, I take my main yarn and move on to crocheting the first row. Where the white starting tail is, that will be the crown. Just remember that. So row 1, chain 1 for the turning chain. Next, insert the hook into the back bump of the foundation chain. Like this. Pick up the working yarn. Make a single crochet, 1. In the next stitch, the next single crochet, 2. In the next stitch, the next single crochet, 3. And I work with single crochets until the end of the row. There will be 35 single crochets in the first row. I crochet into the back bump of the contrast thread. Why? So that it's easier to remove at the end. Then it will come out in one motion. The last 35th stitch in this row, also into the back bump. And with that, the first row is finished. Row 2, chain 1, turn. Now I will crochet all subsequent rows in the back loop only. This is how I will insert the hook. So, make a single crochet in the second stitch from the hook, working in the back loop only. And I work one single crochet in each back loop only. Here I crochet 32 single crochets. And for the last, 33rd stitch, I make a slip stitch there. That is, I will need to decrease the height of the stitches. In total, this will be 33 stitches. So I will not reach the end of the row in the second row by 2 stitches. See you there. Right here, I will show you how I finish the second row. So here, I have finished crocheting the second row. I left 3 stitches unworked. That is, there are 32 single crochets here. And in the last stitch, into the back loop, I make a slip stitch. This way, the height of the last stitch will be less than all the others. Yes, and it will smoothly flow into this wedge. Row 3, chain 1 for the turning chain, turn. Insert the hook again into the second stitch from the hook, and crochet 33 single crochets until the end of the row. Everything is very simple here. So, the last stitch in the third row, I crochet it exactly the same way, into the back loop only. I never crochet like this through both loops. I don't understand why people do that. If you like it that way, do it. If you think that the edge will be more stable or something like that, please crochet that way. But I always crochet all the stitches simply into the back loop only. The third row is ready. Row 4, chain 1 for the turning chain, turn. And in the fourth row, I start this row again in the second stitch from the hook. Again, I crochet single crochets into the back loop only. And here again, at first, I will not reach the edge by 3 stitches. That is, it will be like this. If I had 33 stitches in the previous row, yes, here there will be 30 single crochets into the back loop only, and 1 slip stitch at the end. 30 single crochets are ready. The 31st stitch is a slip stitch. And that was the fourth row. Row 5. Chain 1 for the turning chain, turn. Insert the hook into the second stitch from the hook, and here there will be 31 single crochets into the back loop only. The 5th row is finished. Look, I have formed 3 steps here. Twice I did not reach the edge by 2 stitches. Now for the 6th row. The 6th row is worked all the way to the end. I will show you how the steps close on these stitches. Chain 1 turning chain and turn. There will be 35 single crochets in the back loop only in total. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See you at the steps. I will show you how to connect them. I am now approaching the steps. Here is the first step. I find the turning loop bridge. Insert the hook into it and go into the row below. Pull up a loop from the back loop only of the row below, as if making a regular single crochet. Finish the single crochet. I have made a join through the single crochet. In the next stitch, work 1 single crochet. Here is another step. Insert the hook into the turning loop bridge and into the row below. Pull up a loop and finish the single crochet. In the last stitch, work a regular single crochet. That was the 6th row, and this was the final row in the wedge. This is a wedge, and after this, we will repeat it again and again. This is a very simple wedge. It consists of only 6 rows. Look at what we do next. Next, you just rewind to the beginning, not to the place where I am chained with thread. No need to rewind there. You rewind to the start of the crocheting, to the first row. No need to cut anything. We crochet everything as one solid piece of fabric. And look at how I crocheted the first row. Just take the sequence of numbers from the first row. But I will tell you here too. It was 35 single crochets. So chain 1 for the turning chain. I am doing the first row again. Turn and work 35 single crochets in the back loop only. This way I am crocheting the first row again. Then I will crochet the second row again, then the third row again, then the 4th, 5th, and 6th. So I will repeat from the 1st to the 6th row for the height I need, or precisely for the head circumference I need. During the process of crocheting, I try the hat on myself. And thus, I get the required circumference. You will need to stop at the 5th row. That is, the last row in the very last wedge must be the 5th row. The 6th row will be used to sew this item together. And this way, you will get a harmonious hat with a harmonious crown. Even if the fabric is enough for your head circumference, even if you stop at, say, the 3rd row, no, we still crochet until the 5th row. This is the law. This cannot be broken. That is all. Crochet the fabric. See you there. I will show you how to sew the hat. I finished crocheting the hat for the head circumference. Look, I am stopping before the row that is a full row, the one that works all the stitches and connects all the steps. In total, I got this many mini wedges. They are easy to count. 1, 2, I am counting the full rows, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I am stopping in the 10th wedge. 9 are ready. If I crochet the last full row, the 10th will also be ready, and I will crochet it. But this row is a test row. I crochet it, and then I unravel it. Why am I doing this? I need to accurately measure the length of the thread with which I will sew this hat. So I crochet exactly as I did before. Chain 1 for the turning chain at the very beginning. Here it is. Done. And then I crochet single crochets into the back loop only until the end of the row. All steps are worked with a join. I will be sewing this hat with a seam that mimics single crochets. The trajectory of the thread in it repeats exactly the same path as in single crochets, but the only difference is that it will join these two halves of the item. And therefore, the measurement must also be made this way. An ideal way, crocheting single crochets. They will show what length of thread is required for them. Accordingly, next I will cut the thread and then I will sew. So I work to the end of the row and see you there. I finished the last full row. I cut the thread, but I will leave a small tail here so that I can also pull the crown together with it. And I unravel this row. Don't be afraid. Unravel this row. I unravel even the turning chain. It should look like this. Then I take a large eye needle and thread the tail into this needle. Here, I highly recommend also using a blunt-ended needle. Make sure the end of the needle is just like a knitting needle. Mine still has a sharp end. It can split the thread. The blunter the needle tip, the more convenient it will be for you to work. And then I fold my item in this way. The open loop is in the top right corner. The foundation row is at the bottom edge, closer to me. The starting tail is in the bottom left corner. It must be exactly like this. It won't even work any other way. If it suddenly turns out that the starting tail is on this side, it means you either did too few rows or too many. When I now close this row with my seam, these threads must meet. The starting thread and the ending thread meet at one point. I tie them in a knot, and it turns out that the crocheting cycles. If you have this tail right here, you won't get the pattern. But even if you somehow get this seam, your thread will still end up on two different sides. This means there is an error somewhere. So I insert the needle into the open loop, and thus I close it. Next, I recommend using another hook. You can take one size smaller. I take the row with the foundation thread, and here I look at how the foundation thread is. It's very visible, I think. My cord is the foundation auxiliary thread, and the white yarn is the main one. And look, the cord catches the white yarn, and I repeat the movement of the cord with the needle in exactly the same way. Here I insert the needle exactly where the cord goes. I'm even looking from the wrong side, see? Look, from the wrong side as from the face, and that's how I insert the needle so that the same thing happens. From the face, from the wrong side. In exactly the same way my needle caught these two threads. And I pull out the needle. And now on this side, I insert the needle into the loop, which is like a chain stitch, and tighten it again. And now let's take a smaller hook. It will also suggest the trajectory to us. It will be an auxiliary. Now let's move on to the seaming. You can use a smaller hook as a guide or stay with the original 7mm hook we used for the main fabric. I will use the original one. I insert the hook right into the loop. Imagine that we are crocheting this row. Then this loop, which now catches the starting row, would be on my hook. That is why I inserted the hook into this loop. Next, as if I were crocheting, I insert the hook on the half that is further from me into the back loop, and I would make single crochets along it. Here is one loop for the single crochet. Here is the second loop for the single crochet. And this working loop, which ends up on the hook at the end, simply needs to be pulled out in order to sew it to the start of the project. And here I am pulling it out like this. Here again, I refer to the contrast thread. The contrast thread is a hint. Without it, it will be simply impossible. It will be very difficult to sew this project without a seam and to mimic the trajectory of the single crochets with a needle. Again, I look at how the contrast thread catches the threads of the first row. Here's one, here's two. And I do exactly the same with the needle. I make sure everything comes out from the wrong side, just like that. I caught everything, I'm tightening it. Excellent. And now I need to return to the loop of the previous step. It's a single crochet after all. And it also has a leg, and I return the needle into it and tighten. And again, I put the loop on the hook. This is the working loop. I insert the hook into the back loop, pick up a loop, and finish the single crochet. So I pull the needle out of this loop and catch again. I catch it as the contrast thread tells me. I tighten it and return the needle into the loop. That is, this is the cap of the single crochet, and this is the leg of the single crochet, and I return the needle into them. Just use the hook to make the single crochet while seaming. This creates a perfect seamless item with no visible join. I insert the hook into the back loop only, and I make a single crochet. I pick up the 2 threads that the contrast thread catches, I sew the stitch, and I return something already managed to felt together here while I was sewing. And I return the needle into the cap of the single crochet and its leg. You can mimic a seam this way, actually, with any stitches you like, whichever ones you prefer. In order to correctly make specifically the single crochet that will sew this project together, just use the hook and make a single crochet with the hook. You can mimic a seam this way, actually with any stitches, any that you like. My very first project I made with such a seam was naturally Bosnian crochet. Those were slip stitches, and I have already shown it in work with slip stitches that are made with a yarn over. The principle there is exactly the same. We make this loop with the hook, and then we sew with the needle. Now I am showing how to make such a seam on single crochets. You can also do double crochets and half double crochets. In general, any stitches at your level of difficulty, whatever you want, and you get a perfect seamless item which won't have a seam. It will look very beautiful. In general, I think everything is clear here. I work like this until the end of the row. See you there at the end of the row. There will be steps. I'll show what tricks I use when I sew steps in such projects. So here I have worked this seam. Look, on one side it is already almost ready. Here you can see that it fits perfectly into all these other ridges. And when I remove the contrast thread, then from the other side it will also fit perfectly. I am approaching the crown of the hat, and here I am showing you how you need to continue working this seam if you encounter such steps. The principle is the same as when we were crocheting. Remember, when we were crocheting this row, we made a join for the steps? That is, we inserted the hook into this bridge in the row below. That was a join. And here I do exactly the same. I return the working loop to the hook, and I continue crocheting. Again, the hook movements I make suggest to me how the thread should pass in this seam. I insert the hook into the turning bridge. There it is, in the row below. I pick up the working yarn and make a single crochet. And here I pull out my working thread again. We tighten it. Here, watch the gauge. This is very important so that the item doesn't stand out in the seam with its density. It should be the same as the one you crocheted with. This is probably the hardest moment. And next, again, I kept the 2 threads that the contrast thread catches. Here, I've caught them. I'm watching the wrong side. Also an important moment. And again, I return the needle into the loop. Here, this is the cap of the single crochet. This is the turning bridge, and this is the leg of the single crochet. That is, in this movement, I return the needle into 3 loops and tighten. Again, I take the hook. Again, I put the working loop on the hook. In the next point along the movement, into the back loop only, I make a single crochet. I tighten it just to maintain the gauge. Again, I catch 2 threads that the contrast thread catches, just like that. No, first I'll return the needle into the loop, into the leg of the stitch. I return the working loop to the hook. I insert the hook into the bridge in the row below, into the back loop only. I pull up 1 loop, I make a single crochet. Let me tighten everything here again to maintain the gauge. Well, and the last stitches remain. Again, I catch the threads that the contrast thread encompasses. I return to the loop, to the bridge from the turn, into the leg of the stitch, and I tighten. Again, I put the working loop on the hook. Here, in the row below, into the back loop only, I make a single crochet. And the very last stitch. Look here, there's the contrast thread. Here are 2 threads that it caught. Also, I insert the needle into the loop, into the leg of the stitch. And after this, the last movement. That's it. The seam is finished. Next, we can just tie the threads together in a knot. And look, they meet at 1 point. That's it. The crocheting cycled, the circle closed, the hat is sewn perfectly, seamlessly, invisibly. Next, I open the contrast thread. Next, from the crown side, I open the contrast thread. And then I remove it. Don't be afraid. If you did everything correctly according to my masterclass, nothing will unravel. Only the contrast thread will leave the crocheting. There it is easily removed. And the hat is almost ready. Look at this column. This is the seam. One side, and here is the second one. Naturally, you won't see this seam from one side or the other. I made a seam that 100% mimics single crochets, and accordingly, it becomes part of the crocheting. Well, in principle, I think you are already familiar with this technique because I've shown many times how to make such a seam on Bosnian crochet, and I think nothing surprises you here either. Next, I tighten the crown. It's all very simple. I insert the very same needle. Look, see? Somehow I have a long tail left. I insert it into the edge pips in order to simply pull the crown together. Let's poke it like this at the end, I guess. And I pull the crown tight. And I tie these tails in a knot. Once more. 1 and 2. Now I take the same needle and hide the tails with this kind of wrapping movement along the crocheted row. I hide one tail this way and cut it, then the second one, and with that, the hat is ready. The hat is finished at this point. It turned out bulky and very warm. There is sufficient thickness of the crocheting itself, sufficient thickness of the brims. But at the same time, because I used bulky yarn and a large hook, such a hat can be crocheted in practically one evening. I repeat once more, there is no seam anywhere. The brim is perfectly ideal on both sides. This hat has no front, no back, no right side, and no wrong side. I really hope you like this video. If you crochet such a hat, you can send its photo to my Telegram channel. You can find the link to the Telegram channel under the video in the description or here on the screen. Subscribe. There, I sometimes post charts, life hacks, photos, patterns, and other micro videos about crocheting and knitting. Thank you in advance for your likes, for watching my videos, and for writing comments. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.